Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to do the reader's profile tag. I saw Pat at Book Chat with Pat A668 do this tag, and she said anyone watching the video should consider themselves tagged, and since I'm anyone, I decided to do the tag. I'm just going to say what Pat said to properly credit the creator of this video. This tag was created by Hilary at BookBustle, at Hilary B. Green. There are 11 prompts in this tag. The first prompt is, what for you makes a good book? For me, character is primary. I need to care about what happens to the characters. Mostly this means I need to like them. It takes a lot of skill for an author to write a character that is unlikable that I do care about, but some authors are able to do it. The characters have to be written with enough depth for me to care about them. The plot does have to have enough tension, enough challenges for the characters to go through for me to care about what happens to them. Occasional cozy books are good, but I couldn't really subsist on them. The second prompt is, what are you currently reading? I'm currently reading 4 books. The first is The First Physical Culturist, Ancient Greek Athletics Training Competition by Dr. Alex Dulott. The second is The Hidden Language of Cats, How They Have Us at Meow by Sarah Brown. The third is Rocannon's World by Ursula K. Le Guin. Strictly speaking, I'm actually listening to the audiobook of that one. The fourth is A Psalm for the Wild Boat by Becky Chambers. The third prompt is, what's the last book you didn't finish and why? The last book I didn't finish is The Wheels of Chance by H.G. Wells. The lead character in this book rode his bike all over England. To the point I stopped reading, which was maybe about 15% in. It was just boring. He literally was just riding his bike all over the place and occasionally encountering people. I may well go back and finish it just to be a completist, but I just put it aside because it was boring. The fourth prompt is, what obscure book do you wish other people would read? One book I wish other people would read is Becoming Nicole, The Transformation of an American Family. Not really sure this book is obscure, but with all the anti-trans politicians in the U.S. and them trying to make laws against trans people and the talking heads in the U.S. pontificating against it, I think this would be a good book for more people to read. I don't really expect people who are against trans people to read it, but for the people that might possibly become allies, this would be a good book to read. It might encourage them to become involved in some way. Perhaps invest in organizations that advocate for trans people or contact their politicians or whatever. It would be a good book to read for those people. It is a difficult book to read in points, though. I mean, there's no question about that. Perhaps check trigger warnings. The second book is a fiction book. It's The Music of Bees by Eileen Garvin. This book might not be obscure, but I can't recall any booktubers talking about it. This book is about 3 damaged people who are floundering in their lives. They come together in their shared attempt to raise bees. Ultimately, it's about found family, and it's ultimately quite a heartwarming book. The fifth prompt is, what's the longest book you've ever read? The longest book I ever read is probably the longer version of The Stand by Stephen King. Storygraph shows one of the versions is 1,153 pages. And also I did read the original shorter version before I read the longer version. The shorter version was around 700 pages. So you add those two together, if you consider them one book, and it is way longer than any book that I've ever read, considering I read both versions of it. The sixth prompt is, if you could have a dinner party with 5 fictional characters, who would there be? Now, before I say my choices, I'm going to have to say that the characters wouldn't be able to hurt or kill me because some of these characters would be quite capable of it. The first is Lestat from Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles. He's just a very interesting character. He's very charismatic. He does things his own way. He just likes to go against the grain in the vampire world. He's just a very interesting character. But he could easily kill me if he wanted to. The second is Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot. I'm specifically referring to the David Suchet Hercule Poirot from the television series. He is my favorite version of the Hercule Poirot character. As heretical as it may be to say, I like a character from a really popular book better from an adaptation than I do the original source. I know this because after watching the show, I read 2 or 3 Hercule Poirot books, and I liked them okay, but they didn't compare to the TV character. It's the only time that's ever happened to me. Normally the book is better than the movie. But Poirot would be a very interesting character just to pick his brain. He is a rather arrogant individual, but it would be interesting hearing him talk. The third character is Sam, which is short for Samantha, from A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. She's just a very interesting character. Highly intelligent, but she's interesting the way she talks and lives her life. She's a scientist, and it would be interesting to talk about her. She's a arachnoarchaeologist, which a profession I didn't know existed, but it is actually a real profession. Being interesting to talk to a person about that. The fourth character is Violet Sorrengail from Fourth Wing. She's another character that could kill me if she wanted to. I would just like to talk to her because she overcame so many obstacles in the Fourth Wing book. It's just so many. It'd be interesting to talk to a person like that who just overcame so much, had so much stacked against her, and still triumphed, at least at the end of that book, which is the first in the series. The fifth character is actually 2 characters because they have to come together. It's Emily and Wendell from Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. It'd be interesting on the one hand to see just how they interact with each other. They have a very interesting relationship. Wendell is a fae, and he's another character that could easily kill me if I wanted to. I guess maybe I could hope that maybe Poirot would prevent killing from happening, but there has to be some assurance that I can't be killed because 3 of those characters could kill and injure me very easily. The 7th prompt is 5 books you'd want if stranded on a desert island. The obvious answer to this question is books that would help you survive on a desert island. Books that tell you what plants are edible, how to hunt, how to fish, how to build a shelter, how to signal a possible rescue mission, how to start a fire if you didn't have matches or a lighter or something like that. Books like that. That's the obvious answer. But I know that's not the intent of this prompt. So I'm just going to pick books that I would like to reread and come up with 5 of those. And I came up with 5 of those books. The first is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is simply because I read it 3 times, and that's the most I've ever read a book. The second is War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Same reason as Dracula. I read it 3 times, so that tells you what I think of it. The third is The Complete Works of H.P. Lovecraft. I've read most of his stories 3 times, so for the same reason as Dracula and War of the Worlds. It just shows that I really like the writing. The final 2 books are newer to me. The first is The Honeys by Ryan LaSala. That's just a book I liked a lot. It was my top book for 2023. I recommend it to people. I don't think anybody's taken up my recommendation, but I do recommend it to people. The second is Diary of a Confused Feminist by Kate Weston. This one is a very recent read, so it's maybe more chancy. Actually, the last 2 are chancy because I haven't read them more than once. But going forward, I'm really going to shy away from reading books more than once, I think, simply because even though you can get a deeper, a richer understanding doing that, every book you read a second time is another book, or at least part of another book, that you can't read for the first time. Of the 5 ones I mentioned, I think Lovecraft would be the top one. I don't think I'd ever get tired of Lovecraft, which is kind of funny because it's a very kind of special type of writing. The characters in his book frequently pursue forbidden knowledge, and they pay a serious price for it. They're not characters I particularly like, but it's just interesting watching what unfolds. The 8th prompt is one book you could not put down. That's Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. That recently, I talked about that in one of my recent videos. I know it's a polarizing book, but I really liked it, despite some flaws, but I really liked it. And I couldn't put it down. I want to pick it up again. That's not always the same to me. A lot of times I can't put it down, but I don't want to put it up again because I'm scared what's going to happen to the characters. The 9th prompt is 5 books or authors you will never read. Now, never say never, of course, but I really can't see myself reading any books by Colleen Hoover. She is a very popular author, but I've heard a lot of people talk about her, and some of them like the books, a lot of them don't. But the way the books were described, I don't think they're books that I want to read. The second is I'm never going to read a book by Bill O'Reilly, and that's a certainty. Partly because he was a talking head on Fox News, and more critically because of the sexual harassment allegations against him. I'll never read a book by him. There's a lot of nonfiction authors I'll never read, politicians, supposed experts on controversial topics that I have no respect for, and people who've done something I find reprehensible. And sometimes I just despise the authors of those books. I know things about them that I despise them, and I don't want to support them in any way. But I think this prompt is mainly meant to be about fiction writers. Now, I will say that I do have currently one book by J.K. Rowling. I read and loved the Harry Potter series, and then I read, there was the prequel series they did. There's been some movies. I can't think of the name of it, but at least 2 of the movies came out with books that were like screenplays. I read the first one and I have the second one, and I'm going to read it, but mainly because of her anti-trans views she's expressed. I don't think I'll read anything further from her. Now, I have to admit, though, that it's not like I have a great desire to read more from her. I did love the Harry Potter books from her and the first screenplay book that I read from her. But it's not like there's a great desire for me to read books from her. And this predates the awareness of her views on trans people. So it's easy to say I won't read her, but I don't really have a desire to read her, and that's equally the fact that I just don't, as opposed to any of her views. I just don't have that desire. I have one Stephanie Meyer book left to read. I absolutely love the Twilight series, but I didn't love Midnight Sun. It's the most disappointing book I've read this year. It's the closest I get to a rant video ever. It's not really a rant video, but it's as close as I approach to it. I do have one small book from her. I think it's called The Short Life of Bree Turner, and I probably will read that. But I don't think I'm going to get any more books from her. I'm not sure what her future plans are anyways, but I just think that her books are in the past for me after Midnight Sun. One specific book I won't read is Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. I've heard a lot about it, positive and negative. I don't want to say anything about why I wouldn't read it because it might be a bit of a spoiler. But if you look up that book and you see a synopsis of it, you'll probably see why a person would choose not to read it. Not knocking people if you like reading it, that's fine. I know some people do. Some people love it. Some people didn't. But that's one book that I don't think I have any intention of reading. One thing I do have to admit too, related to this prompt, is that I don't know that much about very many authors of books I read. I do get awareness of some by booktuber videos, but in a sense it kind of makes me sad because I don't really follow many authors on social media. I follow way many more booktubers and bookstagrammers than I do authors. The reason it makes me sad is that I follow lots of athletes, I follow lots of bands and musicians, and I would kind of hope that I would care what's my favorite hobby, the people who created it, but I kind of don't. I might do another video to talk about that some more, but it kind of makes me a little sad that I don't have enough interest. So most of the authors that I read, if they did something controversial, unless it shows up on BookTube, I probably don't know it. The 10th prompt is, if you were to write a book, what would it be about? This is an interesting question. Strangely, despite the fact that I love reading, I've never really had a desire to write a book. I believe that when people do art, whether it's writing or painting or sculpting or anything, they have a strong desire to do it. They do it regardless of whether they would be remunerated for it. But I've never had that desire to write a book. But still, I'm going to talk about the kind of book I think I would want to write if I did write a book. I'd write a fantasy romance. I try to make it equal fantasy and romance, and that's probably a hard thing to do because books you have that are primarily fantasy with a romance, or what they call romantasy, which is primarily a romance with fantasy elements. But I would try to make those two equal. The book would be a dual POV with each of the two main characters alternating chapters. Part of me wants to make it a sapphic romance, but I don't think I have enough knowledge to do that, so it would be an MF romance. The romance would be slow burn too. I like things that take a while to develop. The book would have good world building, which is partly where the fantasy elements come in. That's a complaint of a lot of romantasy books. People don't think they have good world building. The book would have interesting supporting characters too. The book would have enough challenges to the two main characters to keep the book interesting, to keep the story moving, to have enough tension that you're not quite sure what's going to happen next, and you care about what might befall the characters. Any spice in it would be fade to black. But despite this, it would be an adult novel. I think I love YA novels, but I think I'm far too old to write one. I'm far too removed to be able to understand what a current teenager would think. I could read a lot of books about it, but I don't think I have the knowledge to do it. I don't think I'd have a credibility to do it either. The 11th prompt is tag some people. I tag anyone who's watching this video. If you like to do it, please do so. If you like to just only do some of the prompts, please do it that way. If you don't have your own channel, please reply in my comments with the answers to whatever prompts you decide to do. I'd be interested in reading them. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos. I am planning to do, I mentioned in my last video, my last reading wrap-up, that I'm planning to do a series which is my musical journey as a fan through the various decades. The first video, which is for the 70s, I have recorded the raw footage for that, so I hope to release it on Friday. It's not a replacement for any of the book videos. I'm still going to do the same book videos. Generally, I'm going to release a wrap-up video on Sunday and a tag video on Wednesday. The music videos are in addition to that. I hope you're having a wonderful reading week, and I hope you're having a wonderful week in general.